Hello, welcome to Lucy's Big Beautiful World of Painting. I'm really excited today. I have Master Todd Casey with us, all the way from Westchester, New York. And he is an instructor in the tri-state area and a wonderful painter who is represented by the Rays Contemporary Gallery in New York City. I wanted to make sure I said that correctly. And he is a fantastic oil painter. However, today, he's going to be painting with Decoart acrylic paint and showing us how we can do value study, and we will watch him paint a sphere using Decoart mediums to show us how we can blend, okay? So he's kind enough to join me today on my show, and to have Master Todd here is such a thrill for me. And stick with us, watch the show. This is going to be part one of part two. He will be doing the grisaille method on the first show and then painting in color on the second show. So make sure you see both of them, and check out the end of the show where we will be putting his contact information along there, okay? So I want to make sure for now I said what I had to say, so this way we have all that done. Now, today I want to show you first that Todd used the chalky gesso to coat his panel, all right? So he used a couple coats of a gray gesso, and this is the Decoart chalky gesso. He is going to be using burnt umber, the Americana premium paint, and he has a variety of Traditions brushes, a filbert, a round, and a flat, okay? We're not sure which ones he's going to be using yet, but he has a nice variety of brushes at his disposal to use. So that's it for me for now. I'm going to have Todd start, okay, and enjoy the show. And I'll be asking him some questions in between while he's doing his work. And later on, also, you'll be able to see some of his fantastic oil paintings. All right, so Todd, thank you for coming today. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So first, you're going to be doing the grisaille painting. So just tell us a little bit about the grisaille painting.
Sure. In a very, there's two different ways to approach painting in oil painting or acrylic, and one of them is the indirect method, which is what I'll be doing today. It started with the old masters. So the Italian Renaissance is when they would do these underpaintings, and what it would be is a monochromatic underpainting. In grisaille, I think translates to in the grays. It's a French term, French or Italian, and that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to set up my painting just monochromatically, with just a warm undertone of raw umber or burnt umber. Today is actually what we have. Either of the two are good. And then that will set me up so I have my value structure set up.
Okay, tell us just a little bit about your setup before you start.
Sure. I painted a sphere. I believe it's cobalt blue. I usually work under one light source, which is how we set this up today. I blocked out all the excess lighting. Traditionally, this is called a shadow box, normally because you want to contain all the light in your environment. And then I just have a gray panel underneath, which is also the tone of my my panel as well.
Great. And you're going to be using a little butcher's palette.
Yeah, butcher's palettes are great because you soak this with water, and then you put the paint on, and it keeps it wet so it doesn't dry quickly. There's pros and cons to acrylic. The pro of it is that it dries really fast, and the con is that it dries really fast. So I want to be able to kind of dictate whether it's sped up or slowed down. Water helps it slow it, but I can also put it on this dry paper towel here to kind of speed it up if I want to. And then there's also a variety of texture. It's a little on the liquidy side. I have a heavy gel medium over here to make it a little thicker, but I can also pull the water out of it by putting it on the paper towel as well.
Okay, great. So then you're going to first start with a quick drawing, correct?
Yeah, so normally any kind of drawing is done with either some charcoal or a pencil. Today I'm just going to do it quickly in a pencil rather than, typically I would just not use anything. I would just draw it, but I think for time's sake today, I'm just going to draw it on my canvas by just tracing it.
It's a great idea, using a little coaster there.
Yeah, So we had a show at, this is my gallery, Ray's Contemporary, and we created these coasters for the show as a good advertisement. Mm-hmm. So I have my, traced pattern of the sphere. I want to consider just where the break of light is, which is, it's called the Terminator, which is an astronomy term, and it really just has to do with the division of light and shadow. And then I can just quickly get in an idea of just how the shadow would fall on this form. I don't need to show that there's a corner. I don't think, you choose to edit what you want to in your painting, and I don't think that's aesthetically pleasing. So I'm just going to extend it based off of my knowledge of how a cast shadow would be. You can dry brush for doing a grisaille, or you can just go with the paint. I'm going to just see how the paint reacts to the panel. To get this a bit more opaque, I would go just a bit more paint. But really what I want to do is kind of look at the sphere and make sure that at the end of this, I have a solid value structure. So I want, as I look at the sphere, I can see that the cast shadow in the form shadow here is darker than anything in the lights.
And what do you mean by the value structure?
Meaning that if I were to take this, if I were to take a photo of this and turn it to black and white and didn't think about any color at all, every color has a set of, is a value. This is why if you took a photo of it with your phone, you would see that you would just have the black and white version of it. And value structure is the most important thing when it comes to oil painting. So you can have the wrong color but the right value, and it would still feel like it comes off the page. So what I'm trying to do right now is just get the background to be darker than the blue sphere.
So today you're actually using these acrylic paint to mimic how you would paint in oil.
Yeah, and some illustrators and painters will use acrylic underpaintings because they dry so fast. One of the cons about oil painting is that it dries pretty slow. Although earthy colors in general, the pigments are...
so like the browns? And
yeah, they dry really quick. So setting up a background helps me just make sure that I make sure that they separate from one another. I think I can go probably a touch darker. So minimizing my choices here also helps with not going too crazy and thinking about too much color. So I'm going to just add a touch more.
Sure. Do you always paint the background? You start the background first before you start the subject matter?
Not always. I really want to, the most important thing is there's a million different ways to come into an oil painting. I've seen people start at the top left corner and at the bottom right. But the most important thing is to get your value structure, whatever way that you can. For me, I try to look for things that are constant. So what's something I don't have to guess at what the value is? Value is something you have to learn. It's not exactly the easiest thing to just get.
No.
So something like, there's a thing called the Crevice Shadow, which is where the sphere sits on. There's no light that bounces back up into it. That's usually the darkest part of a shadow. So I know something like that I can definitely get in.
Because it's not in question, in other words. It's the darkest.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, I don't have to guess, because guessing values without having everything established on the painting, it may not yield the best results. So finding something that's constant to help me kind of find the rest of the information off of will, get me a little closer to that. And paintings all look ugly at the beginning, so don't worry about it.
The ugly stage. In acrylic painting, we call it the ugly stage when we first start out, and we look at it like, oh no. And then as we continue to work, we notice it starts to look better and better.
Yeah, so if I squint down now, I see that the shadow of the sphere is darker than the background color. So I have to make sure that these two separate from one another. And that tells me that when I go and I start to paint this in blue, it's going to be a lot darker than I think. One of the things that gets in our way is our perception, where we have trouble reading values. We read things in relation to one another. So we have to know that our brain works in our favor, but it also can't process all the information correctly, and therefore we're going to be tricked. And I need to keep that in mind, and to kind of judge values optically, just looking at what's lighter and darker in relation to one another, will help me get things in the right place, kind of steer it.
And I see you have your value scale at the bottom there. And I guess you'll show us a little about that too when you get a moment.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is just add values to this painting that relate to this scale. Now, there's a thing called an open grisaille and a closed grisaille. An open grisaille would mean if I added white, I would get a full range of values. But a closed grisaille, I'm only able to get what this paint will get me, depending on how transparent the paint is. So it becomes a little more opaque, and then I get more of like probably a mid value. I just find it's almost like an archaeologist kind of uncovering information, where I'm just starting to think before I get everything down, I need to kind of collect all the information. It'll help me make the best judgment.
So you're changing the thickness and thinness of the paint, in other words?
Yeah, that's what the medium will do. It'll actually make it get a little thicker.
And that's the heavy gel medium you're using today, Decoart heavy gel medium.
Yeah.
And so you're just dipping your brush a little, and then and that's making the paint a little bit more transparent so you can get your values correct. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually want to get it a little thicker. So transparency is good. That's actually one of the pros of working with acrylic, is that it dries so quickly that you can get a lot of just transparent washes down and build your painting. Some of the best acrylic painters don't particularly work just with this straight out of a tube. They kind of build their painting this way.
Well, I'm inspired just by watching you for these few minutes. Tell me, what inspired you to pick your subject matter or to paint, when you're painting?
Sure. I'm predominantly known as a still life painter these days. I do some portraiture. I'm inspired by everything when it comes to art. It started with Norman Rockwell. I think a lot of Americans are inspired by him. We grew up with a lot of pictures on the wall of his work, and I would say the underlying thing that I'm always looking for in my work is to have a narrative in my work. So all my paintings, like the Shackleton painting in the background, is a narrative. It's essentially Ernest Shackleton got.
So this Shackleton painting is an 18 by 24 inch oil painting, and that is represented by the Ray's Contemporary Gallery. And we still have halfway more in the show to go, so we're doing pretty good there.
Yeah, what I may do is just add a little white, because one thing I want to keep in mind is that, and this is the beauty of acrylic paintings, that you can do it so quickly. It's not going to be perfect. Right now, I'm not considering edges, but I'm able to just kind of get values down, because one thing I want to do is be able to gauge everything off of everything, but I need everything to do that. So everything's right or wrong in relation to the next thing that I put down.
And this little demonstration painting is really for my viewers to understand a little bit about value study, about doing a grisaille painting. I wanted to show how Master Casey can paint in the Decoart oil paints as oil. I mean oil, sorry, as acrylic, but as oil. It takes a little mixing and some medium sometimes, some water, but it can be done very, very nicely. It's just like everything takes some practice.
Yeah, I think that's, I was not good for a long time. And, you know, persistency, I think, is something that should be.
Well, I'm learning so much just for the last 10 minutes or so of watching you paint this.
Oh, thank you. I love to watch other painters. I think as painters, that's one of the exciting things to do. That everyone has something to learn. You know, Bill Nye, the science guy, has a great quote, and that's everyone you meet knows something more about something than you do. And for me, I'm always excited to kind of find out what that is.
I see now you're putting your little highlight in there, and that'll help you gauge your values better. Is that why you put the white in already?
It's almost like it ends up being kind of like a chalk drawing, or a heightened chalk drawing. Now I have the tone of the paper, which is a mid-tone. I have my darks in. I add a little bit of white, but the highlight has to go on separate from the way that I render form. It's a concept called the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection. It means essentially that as I move around this object, the highlight is going to follow me. But the light in relation to the form is the same geometry no matter where I sit. Because the highlight will move with me, I have to put it on last. Because I want to render to a conceptual model, and that's to the lightmost facing plane.
Right.
Which one of these planes is facing the light? And I know that the highlight is not. Like
And that's how you get the roundness to make the sphere look round?
Yeah.
Is by
the next step for me is to put a conceptual model over this. And that just means that I'm going to take and render every bit of value to the lightmost facing plane. So essentially, one of the reasons why a sphere is a fantastic place to start is that when we look at any kind of fruit, it's essentially a squashed sphere with a little stem coming out of it. Oranges are fantastic to start with. Lemons are kind of elongated. Eggs are good. But what we're doing with that, you want to hold that for one second? What we're doing with that is I'm finding what my color is of that, and then I'm just bending values so that there's a transitional value. And I need to find out what that curvature is, because that's what describes the form. So as I render values and I put this model over this, it's going to describe what the form is, which is really, if we turn it to black and white, related to this. So to your viewership, I'd say start with monochromatic underpaintings. They're a fantastic place to start, and then slowly work your way into color. Value does value does all the work, and color gets all the credit. So just the two most important fundamental aspects of drawing, of painting, is drawing and values. You could put any color over this, and it will still feel like a round sphere in space if you nail your values.
And I love the idea that you found something round and traced it on. So I have beginners, and we do that quite often in my shows. We try to find little tricks to start with, and then we start to advance more, and then maybe the next time we don't have to use it. But I think it's great to find a little trick at first to start, just so you don't get frustrated, because a lot of people give up after a while.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of joy in painting, but it's also frustrating. Edgar Degas said, painting is fun when you don't know what you're doing, and it's extremely difficult when you do.
True.
So it depends on how layered you want to get into what we're doing here. You know, I show professionally, so I'm always trying to take my paintings to the next level.
And speaking of that, tell us a little bit about your training while you're painting your values there.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to tweak this too, and spend a lot of time. Try not to dictate. You know, I know you have a certain amount of time on your show here, but also in the luxury of your home, let the painting take as long.
Take your time. And I say that at least 3 times every show, because I hurry through to try to get the lesson out, but I always tell my viewers, take your time, take your time. You have plenty of time when you're at home and you have that block of time for painting. Take your time.
Yeah. So my training, I went to Massachusetts College of Art in Boston. I was always, pretty good at art in high school. I wanted to be a professional basketball player.
Oh.
I'm not that good at basketball, but I wanted to. I wanted to play for the Celtics. My mom was a basketball player, and she was the captain of her basketball team. She was a tremendous athlete, and I admired her. and she was way better than I was. So I think I used to work a lot overtime and just dribble in my basement, work with my mom a lot, and I think I took that kind of training and then brought it into, my mom was like, why don't you focus on art? You're already good at it.
And you're also a graphic artist. You were a graphic artist prior to becoming a master painter.
Yep. Yeah, just kind of art all over the place. I love it all. My brother's a graphic designer. He works in Manhattan at Ralph Lauren, which is where I used to work. And my wife, I met her at Ralph Lauren.
Very nice.
We're all graphic designers. So my training was, I got a degree in illustration because I wanted to paint like Norman Rockwell. And then I went to live in New York and tried to make it as an illustrator. I was not that good at it, which, it happens. But
now you found your calling.
Yeah, in a roundabout way, I ended up moving to San Francisco to pursue a degree in animation. I tried that out for a while, found that that wasn't for me. And then in that training is where I was introduced to the atelier system. And then I found a master painter in New York City, Jacob Collins, to study under.
Very nice.
And then studied with him for 4 years in his atelier.
Tell us how do you say that word again? I always say it wrong. Atelier.
Yeah, it's just French for workshop. Essentially, we go to his house 5 days a week from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock at night.
Extensive training.
Yeah, and then we just work from the figure. So I'm just reorientating the cast shadow because it's related to the direction. Yeah, I just was going to say, I saw that you changed that a bit. Yeah, always take a step back. If this were my studio, I would go grab a coffee, or I like to garden a lot, and just take a break and come back and take a look at it. You want to have a three-dimensional understanding of how light works, how forms work in space, and where the shadow is tells me everything about where the light is and then where the cast shadow. It should be falling back in space.
And I see you're constantly readjusting. So a shadow that you had that was a little lighter, you made it darker. Yeah. And then I saw that you went underneath and you made it a grayish, a lighter color, which brought out the cast shadow more.
Yeah, and it's, optically I'm looking at the information in front of me. Conceptually, I'm also understanding what the form is in space. Almost like if I had a drone and I flew up over it, I'm kind of surveying this. We used to sculpt and paint because the two together will give you a real sense of dimension rather than optically copying exactly what I see in front of me, which will yield good results. But one has, you're heightening the magical thing that's happening, which is really getting this thing to pop up off the page.
Is that like saying you're using your artistic license?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I can look at information in front of me and know that something is incorrect. Joseph Albers did this. He was at Yale University. If you go to any modern museum, you'll see all of his kind of paint squares. And what it is just, we can almost sometimes look at the things in the context and we can't see the bigger picture. And the two concepts, optical and conceptual, keep me so that I don't make my lights compete with my darks and my darks compete with my lights. Once we get into color, I'm going to show that kind of line in the sand, stay over L1, don't cross over, because when you do that, most commonly, lights in the shadow, or reflected light is what it's called. The light part of a shadow is where constantly I'll see early students make it really light. And it should group with the shadow instead of competing with the light. Right.
No competing, which is what I have been doing. So I appreciate that you've been helping me with my own work. We just have a few minutes left, so take a peek and see where you want to continue. So where you think we'll get the most bang for our buck with you here today, so to say.
So to keep in mind, I would just say, I want to make sure that I'm rendering to a conceptual model. And that would mean that this is my light most facing plane, meaning that all my transitions from light to dark are going to roll to that and not to the highlight. So it's why I'm conscious of when I put this on. I can't go on too early, I'll either put it on at the beginning or at the end, because constantly the beginner student will always roll from the dark to the light highlight, and it actually should roll past it. You almost want to take that off and roll to that. The highlight is sitting on the surface of the object. Light shears into two components. Not to totally dork out.
Yeah, I'm trying
but
to.
I probably am.
we want to try to keep it simple. So in layman's terms, let's say that in layman's terms for us beginners.
Yeah. So essentially, the highlight will dictate what the surface material is. So a shiny object is going to have a clear highlight, and something like a matte sphere, which I think we have one around here, will yield a almost non-existent highlight.
Okay.
And that just means that the light particles are absorbing into the material, and when they reflect off is when we see a clear highlight.
Okay. So we just have another minute left. I want to thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
And again, to my audience, this is part 1. Part 2, Todd is going to continue with this same painting, and he's going to make it blue. He's going to make a blue sphere, and we'll get another shot of this. We're going to have Todd's information on, so you can take a look at where you can contact him. You can go to the Ray's Contemporary Gallery in New York and take a look at his beautiful oil painting work. And before I forget, Todd does have a book on Amazon for oil painting, a beautiful, beautiful book. And you can go to Amazon and look it up. And the name of it again is?
The Art of Still Life.
The Art of Still Life. And please go take a look at that. You won't be disappointed. So
yeah, there's
Yes.
everything from composition, drawing, form, understanding what you're looking at, why you're looking at it. This is the first place always in artist training.
So this is a great little lesson for you to look at, and I know I'll be looking at this a few times myself. And you can continue painting in a couple of minutes. And again, thank you so much for coming, and we'll have Todd's information on again so you can take a peek. Thank you so much, and thank you, Todd.
Thank you for having me.